Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Timothy Fowler. I'm the Professional Development Director with the New York State Network for Youth Success. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about the Quality Self-Assessment Tool 3rd edition. Specifically, we're going to talk about how to roll that tool out and use it as a way to get your program involved in quality improvement over the course of a year. We're especially going to be interested in the details of how that rollout works, how you get people involved, how you get good results, and how you build on those results for the future. So our agenda for today's webinar, we're going to be talking briefly about the Network for Youth Success. We're going to look a little bit at the Quality Self-Assessment Tool and just talk about how it's structured, but then we're going to spend the bulk of our time on the next 4 areas: how you plan for quality improvement, what you need to think about, how to implement the process and get as many people as possible involved, how to assess the learning afterwards and see how that process worked for you, and then we'll end by creating a plan that you can walk away with from there. And then we're going to leave some time at the end of the hour for questions so that we can try to be responsive to your needs and your concerns about rolling out the Quality Self-Assessment Tool. So we've asked you to introduce yourself in the chat box, so please let us know that you're here. Open the chat box and send a message to us. Just tell us your name, where you work, what your experience is with the QSA tool, and what you hope to learn. That's really great information for us, just so that we hear a little bit about where people are physically, but also where they are in terms of their familiarity with the tool. So please go ahead and do that. In the meantime, I'm going to introduce our organization and tell you a little bit about the Network for Youth Success. So the Network for Youth Success is a statewide after-school intermediary. You may know us by our other former names: After School Works New York, or the New York State After School Network. NYSAN is where the Quality Self-Assessment Tool began, so many people still call it the NYSAN tool, but we're now the Network for Youth Success. Our mission has not changed. We are here to strengthen the capacity and commitment of communities, programs, and professionals to increase access to high-quality programs and services beyond the traditional classroom. Our work is to support your work. So any program, whether it's after school, summer, or any other expanded learning opportunity, anytime youth are being served outside of a traditional classroom, we want to help them do that work at a high level. We want to help them increase their capacity, and that looks like a couple of different things when you talk about the actual work that we do day to day. So we have regional networks across the state that help connect people in their local areas around common purpose, whether that's professional development or advocacy. We support accreditation. We are the accrediting body for after-school programs that do school-age care. We also credential staff. So school-age care credential is managed by us. We help people learn and qualify to become site directors in licensed programs in the state. We're also the state affiliate for the National After School Association, and we're the lead agency for the New York STEAM Girls Collaborative, which is part of the National Girls Collaborative Project. If you want to learn more about our organization and the work we do, there's lots of ways you can stay connected with us. You can sign up for our listservs. You can follow us on Twitter. If you're especially interested in policy and advocacy, Twitter is the way to go. If you are more concerned about the front line and work with young people, I recommend our Facebook page because we post a lot of activity ideas and programmatic ideas on Facebook. But you can also check out our website, networkforyouthsuccess.org. That's where all of those resources and more are available. In fact, a lot of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you today about the QSA are all freely available for download on our website. And throughout the webinar, we will be posting links in the chat box about some of these different things so that you can get to them directly during the webinar. Briefly, I just want to tell you about the QSA tool. We did a webinar a couple of weeks ago about the tool and how it's structured, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. All of these webinars are archived on our website and our YouTube channel, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, the QSA tool is in a 3rd edition. You can access that from our QSA special page, networkforyouthsuccess.org/QSA. You see that it is rebranded with our new name, so NISAN is no longer on the tool if you're familiar with the older version. One of the things that's changed is a reorganization about the whole thing. We've tried to make fewer indicators that made more sense and were more specific, also with less overlap. So if something is brought up in one element, it does not appear in another element. There is, however, a whole new element, the supplemental element, informal STEM learning, to help shape those programs that are trying to do science, technology, engineering, and math. They have their own section that's based on the Dimensions of Success assessment tool, which was created out of Harvard by the Pear Institute. So that tool is specifically, or that section of our tool rather, is specific to helping people improve the quality of their STEM learning opportunities. Other than that, there's actually a lot of things that were cut from the third edition, things that were reformatted, combined, and simplified. Again, you can go to our website and download the whole tool and look at it. The format of each element has not changed drastically. You see that each element, for example here, environment and climate, has a variety of numbered indicators below it. So in this case, it talks about how the physical environment of a program and gives you 6 indicators of a quality program. To the right, it asks you to rate based on performance level, and there's also a place to note, is this something that we want to change or improve right now, this year, or next year? All of this is meant to help shape the consensus process, which we'll talk about in a minute. So it gathers a lot of opinions in a very short amount of time and allows program leaders to look at all of these quality indicators and get a sense of where they're strong and where they have room for improvement. Performance levels, it's a 4-point scale. You are shooting for a 3, satisfactory meets standards. So even though the scale goes up to 4, 3 means you're in great shape. If you can score a 4 on any indicator within the QSA, that means not only are you doing this at a high level, but you've mastered this area and could probably help or train other people. So programs that score a 4 in an area, these are programs for whom staff are highly experienced, highly trained, or both, and could also be presenting at state and national conferences on that topic. So that's certainly amazing if you can get there, but not necessarily what you want to shoot for with everything. Any area that is rated a 1 or a 2 means that there's room for growth. So that's how the performance levels work. For each indicator, you're looking to score where you see the program based on these things. So the process is what we're going to focus on. So given that you're going to have a lot of people using this QSA tool to rate the program, how do I get them involved? What does that look like? In its simplest form, the cycle of improvement is assessing the program using the QSA tool, creating a plan for quality improvement, and then implementing the plan, doing the things that people agreed are going to increase the quality based on that element or indicator. And then you reassess, you update your plan or create a new plan, and then implement the new plan. So that cycle continues. Some grantees under the state of New York are required to do this once a year. So they would do this once every school year. Others are required to do it twice. So you would update during the course of the year and make sure that you're going through this cycle 2 times. Today, we're actually going to follow this exact same cycle, but we're going to start with planning. We're going to give you all the tools to understand how to create a good plan. We're going to walk you through what that planning looks like, what implementation looks like, and what assessment looks like so that you have a sense of how this all rolls out. So I'm interested to see if anybody has any things that they would like to share in the chat box regarding their experiences with quality improvement, problems and pitfalls, or benefits. So the chat box should be one of your options. There's a little bubble at the bottom of the screen. You should be able to open that, and there should be a box on the right side. If you just want to share as we're going some of the different issues that you've seen, successes you've had, from doing this process. We'll give you a minute to think about that and type that in before we move on. When we talk about planning for improvement, one of the key things for program leaders to think about is what is this going to look like over the entire year. So one of the things that is going to be important for you to do is to create a plan of how this is going to roll out, who's going to be involved. There's lots of different decision points, and we actually have a document that will help you with this planning. So Allie, if you have that link to the QSA Planning Tool, that'd be great to share in the chat box now. That will help you capture some of the things we talk about here as we go. This is something you can download from our website, print out, or fill in. But what we're going to talk about now is when I'm starting this process, what are the things that I need to think about and how am I going to implement it? So the first thing to do is to identify somebody who is going to be managing this entire process. Who is going to lead the QSA process? This self-assessment leader could be a site level leader. They could be a site director, a program director. They might be an upper level manager. They could also be a lead teacher or a person who's looking for leadership opportunities. Doesn't have to be a formal director or formal manager or administrator. But that person does have a very clear role. They take charge of the process. They should take the entire QSA first and use it as a tool to assess the entire program, so they fill out all the elements that apply. And then they collaborate with other staff and stakeholders and determine who's going to be involved in this process and when are we going to do it. Who's going to facilitate the discussions once we finish the assessment? How is that data going to be compiled and shared? And how are we going to make sure that this assessment actually turns into a planning document and that planning document actually gets implemented for program improvement? So again, this could be a site director, but it doesn't have to be. Many times we see that it's a site level leader or that first site supervisor, whatever language you use, whether that's program director, site manager, is that person. So that's the first question for you to think about is who is that leader going to be? Once that person is determined, that's the leader, the self-assessment leader, who's going to be managing and confirming a lot of the other decisions that go into this process. So the next decision they have to make is who is going to be involved. So the self-assessment leader is going to invite all the key stakeholders. This could include youth participants in your program. It could include the program staff, parents, guardians, and family members. If you're school-based, you might include school administrators. You might have partner organizations that are either vendors or volunteers or collaborators who get involved. 21st Century Community Learning Center programs have an external evaluator who might be involved in multiple ways in this process, but you get to decide that. So the self-assessment leader is going to talk with all of the different people that they work with, so program staff, probably their supervisors, and say, well, how do we want to do this? But make some decisions about those stakeholders. You don't have to include all of these people. You can include any of these people, but that's a decision that has to be made. Once you've decided that, though, you want to thoughtfully involve them in the process. So just saying, hey, fill out this survey is not necessarily a thoughtful way to do it. How am I going to let them know about this process, why it's important, and what to do with it? So part of that discussion is going to be the breadth of this whole process. Am I going to ask my stakeholders to fill this out all at once, all 11 elements? Am I going to ask them just to do one at a time, whether that's weekly or monthly? Are we going to work on one and then go through that cycle just with one element? So starting with element one, create a plan of action, implement that plan, and then when that's done, move on to the next one. There's lots of ways you can do it. So this is the second decision that has to be made by the self-assessment leader. How are we going to roll this out? What are we going to tackle all at once? So at this point, it might be important for you to clarify why are we even doing this quality self-assessment. If it's a mandate for your grant, that's one thing, but do you recognize the positive value in doing a quality self-assessment? Are you clear on how this is going to make a better program for your young people, that it's going to make a better work environment for you and your staff, that parents and your partners are going to benefit because now you're going to have improved the quality in some very clear ways. So in part of this conversation, that messaging is also going to have to be decided. How do we let people know the importance of this? What's the value that we find? At this point, if you've downloaded the QSA tool, the planning tool that Ali shared in the chat box, you can look at number 2 on the handout and decide who is going to complete the self-assessment. Will you ask them to complete all the elements? How long are you going to give them to complete the self-assessment? And what resources will they need to do that? Are you going to give them print copies? Will they be doing the digital spreadsheet version, which means that you might have to provide a tablet or a computer for them to use in order to enter it, depending on their access? Sometimes just supplying pens is an important thing to think about. So we will be sharing those decision points throughout this webinar just so that you can get a clear sense of all the decisions that have to be made and the things to think about in order to make your rollout seamless. Another role that's important in the process is the facilitator. So once the quality self-assessment results have been gathered, then someone should facilitate a discussion with all of the stakeholders who participated so that you can make sense of the assessment data. So this person can be the self-assessment leader, but some programs choose to have a second person facilitate so the self-assessment leader can participate fully, so that they can share their viewpoint and their perspective and their hopes and their thoughts. So an external facilitator can be great if you can find that person. Whoever you get to do facilitation, there are some things that you really want from them in order to make sure that it's a positive experience. So they need to be able to engage all the stakeholders, and they need to create an atmosphere that's safe, comfortable, and empowering. You really want to hear people's opinions, no matter how raw or unfiltered that might be. You really want to get people's honest input on what's great about the program, what's good about the program, what's not good, and what frankly needs to change immediately. So creating that kind of environment is the facilitator's job so that you can get all that out in the open and work with it. Making sure that everyone is able to contribute and participate, actively listening and making connections, trying to find some bigger picture things, common themes in what people are saying is a great job for a facilitator to do. They should be able to answer questions about policies or procedures that relate to the program. They don't want to make it personal. They want to be non-judgmental, but they also want to keep things focused and bring it to consensus. So you can't let the conversation continue on into the night if people have already reached agreement. A good facilitator knows, I think we're ready to move on, let's move on. So who is going to be your facilitator is another decision point. Do we have somebody that we can bring in and do this, or is this going to be a role that we have to fulfill ourselves? Accessing the tool, again, is free on our website. So once you've decided on who's going to participate, you can direct everyone to our website to get all of the information. They can download a PDF copy of the tool and print it or view it. There are also spreadsheets that you can email to people or have them fill out on a computer or tablet, and I'll show you those in a minute. More and more programs are choosing to go that digital route because it allows them to quickly gather all of the data and turn it into a really usable form. Ali has posted the website in the chat box, so if you want to go there directly, you can start looking around and see what that's all about. One of the things that is important to think about is when you're doing this tool, how is it going to fit into our existing calendar? So this slide shows a sample of what goes on in a typical month. We see that there's a teacher in-service day, there's a parent night, we have 2 staff meetings scheduled for the month of October, but you also see that it says this is our timeline. This is where the QSA fits into that calendar. So as you're starting to think about how are we rolling this out, when is a very critical part of the planning process. When are people going to enter this information? When are we going to bring it up or introduce it to key constituents? If I'm going to have teachers and administrators, when am I going to share that with them and show them how to do this? When are staff going to get a chance to review the results? When are we going to have a chance to bring all of our stakeholders together? So planning that out, not just in the near future, but across the entire program year is important. And Ali has shared a link to a PDF where you can get a sense of how that might look across the year. So not just doing the assessment initially, but the consensus process and then the implementation process. So this calendar tool really helps you think about what it might look like across the entire year. Timing is an important thing with the quality self-assessment tool. When are we going to start this project? When can we start this project, given that we've got all of these other things going on? Some programs do it right at the beginning of the year. It's a way to unify the staff and get everyone thinking about quality, and it gives you the most time to work on improvement. Others wait until sometime in the middle of the year after things have sort of settled from initial enrollment and startup and hiring, but before you get too far into the year. And others wait until the end of the year when they've got, especially for newer programs who maybe this is their first year, they wait until they've got some a chance to sort of get everything under control, and then they look back and say, okay, what did we learn and where's our room for growth? Those are decisions only you can make. We can't tell you one is better than another. They all have positives and negatives. So consider, are you going to be able to go through the entire process depending on when you start in that year? Is staff turnover going to be a problem or a challenge for you? And are there other program commitments or priorities that are going to take precedence over what you are trying to do with the QSA? For example, December is an awful time for some programs, especially community-based organizations, if they're doing holiday giving, if they're coordinating families to get families to buy them gifts, or if they're trying to coordinate aid for other people that they're serving. They're already tapped out and doing that extra work. They can't also participate in a QSA. So some programs choose not to do anything during that month. But if you're trying to start now in November, that's good to know that you might not be able to pick threads up until after the new year. That might affect your timing. So planning is going to involve a lot of decisions, a lot of scheduling, and a lot of involvement. What I want to talk to you now is what happens when you actually start to implement, and now you're starting to follow up on those decisions and actually get the tool in people's hands and get that data back and what you do with it. So when people survey their stakeholders, they do it a couple of different ways. One of the ways they do it is through the paper version. They download and print out the tool and have people fill it out with a pen and then turn it back in. Another way that we strongly encourage, because we think it's easier and saves a lot of time, is for people to download a spreadsheet. So the entire tool has a spreadsheet format, and Ali has just shared that link in the chat box if you want to open those up right now. One is a survey version, and then there's also a compilation version. So the survey version gets sent out to your stakeholders, and the compilation version is what's used by the self-assessment leader to take all those individual surveys and turn them into one big set of data. So I'll show you why that's such an exciting thing. Another thing that we've heard from the field, but we've never seen an actual example of, is that people will take key elements or key indicators and break them down into a way that's much more palatable for young people to participate in. So if you're talking about children who are pre-literate, so kindergarten, maybe even first grade, second grade, that they can't handle the long language, even sometimes just taking the tool and editing it down to key things that you want youth input on, that's another option for you in terms of getting your stakeholders to participate. So this slide shows us a few graphs, and this is what that compilation spreadsheet can do for you. So on the left, we see multiple boxes. This is one element. All of the survey data has been put into this compilation spreadsheet, and it automatically creates these charts. So there's no extra work. Each of these spreadsheets has an instructions tab. It tells you how to fill it out, how to get this information, and how to filter it. So what you can see here at a glance is how all of your stakeholders voted on each indicators. In this box on the left, each of those charts is a different indicator under one element. So you can quickly see that, for example, indicator 8, everyone agreed we were at a 3. But on indicator 1, there's quite a range. A lot of people said 1, but some people said 2 or even 3. So quickly you can see with all of your stakeholders together, how are we doing? Where do we already agree and where do we disagree? And that can help you focus your conversations. On the right, you can see one indicator broken out in 2 different ways. One of the things the spreadsheets allow you to do is to have people identify who they are, what kind of stakeholder they are. So this top right graph is parents. This is what parents thought about indicator 1 under programming and activities, providing activities that reflect the mission of the program. Below it, you see the same element and indicator, but now this is what frontline staff said about that exact same indicator. So when there's a big difference in voting, sometimes it's helpful to say, well, let's look at what each different type of stakeholder said and see if that's where maybe there's some differences of opinion. This is really helpful if you've got a small group of people as opposed to everybody who filled out the tool who are trying to make sense of the data. But it's another way that you can visualize and quickly start to see trends and start to make sense of them. Again, all of the spreadsheets free on our website. We do not gather any data from the spreadsheets. It's all yours. You get to keep all of it. None of it comes back to us. So it's all personal, private information. So building consensus, I've mentioned this a couple of times now, but this is when you bring all of your stakeholders together and you try to get them to agree on what the actual state of the program is. So for each indicator across each element, you're trying to get them to make sense of the information and come to some conclusions about it, and you want full agreement. So if you have a second, please enter in the chat box, what have you done to get a group to come to consensus? If you can identify some of your tips and strategies, we would love to hear about them. One way that I've heard people do it that I think is great is just by setting some time boundaries and setting some ground rules up front and saying, hey, we're going to meet for 2 hours. We're going to get through as much of this tool as possible, but this is how we're going to do it. We're going to have one person speaking at a time. We're all going to listen, and we're really going to make sure that we honor everybody's time. So just setting those kinds of things really helps you get to consensus. Before we move on, I see that Miguel has a question. How can you add more than one stakeholder to the spreadsheet? Great question, thank you. So the survey spreadsheets are meant to be done by individual people. So I send the spreadsheet out and everybody fills it in for themselves. They all email the spreadsheets back to the self-assessment leader or whoever's gathering that data. Then the compilation spreadsheet has instructions on how to get each of those individual spreadsheets into the compilation spreadsheet. So the compilation spreadsheet tells you how you take each of those multiple spreadsheets and put it all together. But that's what the compilation spreadsheet does. So you follow those instructions, you take all of the individual spreadsheet information, you put it into the compilation spreadsheet, and then the compilation spreadsheet is all set up, all the formulas are already put in there, and it organizes the data for you. So I don't want to answer the question with more detail than that because the spreadsheet has all of the instructions. It's the first tab in each spreadsheet. So if you want to download that and look at it right now, all the instructions are there. Both the survey spreadsheet has instructions if you're sending it to a parent or a staff member, and then the compilation spreadsheet has instructions for that self-assessment leader in terms of how they do it. So I don't want to get too technical and then be wrong. So, but that's how they're set up to make it easy for you to get individual data and put it together into another data. And if that did not answer your question, Miguel, then please let me know in the chat box and I will try again. Again, we have a planning tool for you to use to answer that question and other questions about the planning. So who's going to be involved in prioritizing items for improvement? Because the consensus process should lead you to agreement on where you're doing really well and what you need to improve on. So once you've had that conversation, who's going to take it to the next step? Who's going to put that into an actual action plan? who's going to make sure the plan gets implemented, and when will you assess your progress? Are there milestones along the way, whether that's a staff meeting, maybe a quarterly meeting, your advisory council is going to meet and review progress, but those are all decisions you have to make too. It's great to have that discussion and to bring everybody together and come to consensus. You generate a lot of energy from that, but the next step is let's turn that into action, and that's what we're going to talk about next. We do provide an action plan template. Some programs already have this under control. Some managers are great at planning, but if you're not, or if you're stuck, we do have an action plan tool that you can use. It clarifies what element and indicator you're talking about, what performance level you're currently at, and then what steps you're going to take to make changes to go from one performance level to the other. It also includes room for who's responsible, when that's going to happen by, and any resources you need. So we actually have a couple of versions of this action plan on our website. Allie has posted that link in the chat box. The action plan download also includes a filled-in version as an example, so you can kind of see how people have used this and how to phrase the language in each section to make it a usable tool. The other thing we strongly encourage you to do is to make sure that your goals are SMART, that they're specific, measurable, achievable, results-focused, and time-bound. So option A here is to offer more project-based activities that promote creativity. That's great. That's wonderful if your process helps you identify that you're not doing enough to promote youth creativity, which leads to critical thinking, which leads to a lot of other positive things. But that goal is a little squishy. It doesn't tell me when things are going to happen. It doesn't tell me who's going to do this. I need more detail. So option B gives you that detail. So to promote participant creativity by offering at least 2 project-based activities per club per semester by January 1st. So that's much clearer. It has much more detail, and only you can decide if that's achievable or not. Maybe that's too much, but if you agreed that we can do that, now I have very clear measures within that. I know when we're going to make sure all of that is done by. So now I've got a much clearer idea of what's going on. I can also surmise who is responsible, because if this is done by club, then whoever's leading those clubs is probably going to be responsible for making sure we're doing project-based activities. But you might even put that into your goal. If you have never used SMART goals before, we do have a template to help you understand how to take a goal and make it SMART. And Allie has shared that link with you. It's a Word doc, and you can print that out. I use that in some of our workshops on other topics just to help people get better at goal setting. Because if you set a good goal that's really SMART and has all 5 of those elements, it's much easier to follow through on reaching that goal. The other key piece of this planning part is building accountability. So making sure that you are working together and then assigning responsibilities in a way that's reasonable helps you make sure that you'll actually get it done. So the consensus process involves a lot of people. Your planning process may involve fewer people, but you want to make sure that you're communicating with everyone about who's doing what and how we're going to do it. Breaking each action plan down into a SMART goal helps to clarify things, making sure that the appropriate person has those tasks. So you can't give everything to one person. If you do, they're probably not going to be successful. So making sure that that person has support or that other people are getting the appropriate pieces, that's a key part of making sure that your plan will be successful. Making sure that there's both deadlines and check-in points. So I think this is where a lot of people get stuck. Having a deadline is great, but if I don't have a check-in maybe at the midway point, I might have forgotten that was due, or I might have started it and not finished it because I was waiting for somebody else or I was missing a resource. So check-ins can be really helpful well ahead of a deadline. Having that self-assessment leader oversee how things are going, reaching out and checking in an active way, not just passively waiting for a deadline to pass, but actually like helping people achieve what they said they would do. and then reporting back to all of your stakeholders. So at staff meetings, at advisory council meetings, saying, here's where we are on our plan. All of those details help you make sure that you're accountable. Remember, this is you assessing your own program, creating your own plan, so the only people who can hold you accountable is you. So by doing these elements, you're accountable to yourself for the stuff that you wanted to do and that you thought was reasonable. We have several tools. We've already shared those with you, but there's some other things that I want to make sure that you are aware of, because these are all meant to help you implement your quality improvement plan and really do this faithfully. Again, all of these tools are free. They're on our website. They're available to download. networkforyouthsuccess.org/QSA is where you go. All of the tools are there. Recordings of our webinars are there, so if there's anybody else on your team who needed to hear this information, they can come and view it at their leisure. This is an example of what the spreadsheet looks like. So it looks very similar to a page from the tool, except it's a spreadsheet. So I can click in that cell and enter the number. There are drop-down menus both for performance level and plan to improve. So people can just click, choose, and move right on to the next thing. QSA-survey-compilation-spreadsheets is where that's kept, and Ali has already shared the link in the chat box for those that are following along on the webinar. So this is, again, a great way to get a lot of people to enter the data. You can email it to people. They can do it at home. You can have a computer or a tablet workstation ready. If you have people that come in, they can do it on, as they pick up, or just drop by, and you can make time in your program for them to do it, make a little space for them to do it. If you do have families or stakeholders who don't have access, that might be a problem, so just be aware of that when you choose to roll this out. The real benefit after the fact is for the self-assessment leader, because now they've got all of this information in a digital format. They can cut and paste, add it to that compilation spreadsheet, and get all of the data all summarized automatically. If you do the paper version, sometimes that's more convenient for your stakeholders. They can print it, they can go, they can have it while they're waiting in line somewhere, or they can fill it out while they're watching television. But then somebody has to enter all of that data and compile it by hand. So you have to choose who's going to be more convenient for. Those are free. Again, we do not get that data. So programs that enter data and use the spreadsheets, we do not get that. That does not secretly come to us in any way, shape, or form. The spreadsheets help you rate the program. The compilation spreadsheet helps you collect the responses and turn them into beautiful visuals, but we still do not get that information. The spreadsheets are yours. The data is yours. It does not go anywhere into the cloud for us to get. Another tool that we haven't mentioned is a professional development planning tool. So one of the things that comes up in the process is that training might be a way to improve quality in the program. So if every staff person has an individual development plan, how does a site director or leader then say, well, these are the trainings we should do? So this tool allows you to keep track of all of the different training needs within the organization, especially if they're not universal, we all need this training kind of needs, and allows you to prioritize. Well, if this person has this training need, this person has this need, oh wait, these other staff people had a similar training need, why don't we bring somebody in? Or, oh, you're the only one who has this training need, so we're going to have you go to a conference or attend a workshop somewhere else. So this is a great tool, not just for the QSA, but just for making sure that you're managing professional development and supporting your staff in their growth. This comes to us, by the way, from our partners at PASE, and Ali has already added that link to the chat room. And it's an Excel spreadsheet. I did not know that. I've only seen it as a Word document, so awesome. So now we're moving on from planning into assessing. So you've assessed your program. That's what the A in QSA is for, quality self-assessment. But now we're going to assess the process. Your self-assessment leader has been doing all of this work, getting all of these people involved, gathering this data, creating plans. But when do they stop and reflect on the work that they do? So part of your planning should be blocking out time to stop and look at everything that's happened so far. What action items were completed in your plan? What's not being completed? What's going to roll into your next cycle or next year? And do you think your program was successful? Are you seeing results that actually improve the quality of your program? Were you successful in that sense in any way? Another thing to think about is, were you successful? So the self-assessment leader needs to take some time and think about all the different things that they did, and were they successful in doing that? Were there some things about the process that worked really well? Or were there some areas where now you have new learnings? You're like, oh, I wish I had done that differently. I wish I had approached this stakeholder in a different way, or I wish we'd used the spreadsheets, whatever it may be. Making time to reflect is usually the first thing that gets cut when you're short for time. And this is a critical piece if you really want to maximize your learning in the process. So definitely block out time as part of your calendar in doing this process to stop and reflect. This is in addition to any check-ins along the way, any communication to stakeholders, because that's also a great time to get some feedback from people, what's working, what's not. But try to collect that all at once towards the end of your cycle, whether that's mid-year or end of year, to say, what can I do better to make this whole process better? So finally, to wrap up our webinar, I want to make sure that you all have some time to actually create a plan to take all of this back to your organization. Ali shared with you the QSA Planning Tool. At the very bottom of the second page, the backside, there are some key questions to answer right now. So identifying when you are going to do all of that work, clarify who the self-assessment leader is, clarify who your facilitator is, when are you going to start, who else is going to help you. That's the next critical part of this whole thing. Now that we've overviewed all of the different details of all the steps in the process, someone needs to go back and say, okay, let's make some decisions. This QSA planning tool is designed to help you clarify those questions and capture your answers. Again, this is all free, available on our website, but Ali has posted that planning tool again in the chat box. You can download it and look at it right now and start to answer some of those questions. If not, you can print it out and take it to your self-assessment leader or fill it out at your leisure and figure out what you're going to do next. But that's what that tool is for, to help you plan this whole process from start to finish. I want to make sure that we have time here at the end of the webinar for people's questions. I appreciate the question that's already been asked, but I know that lots of people have lots of questions. Even though we covered a lot of ground, it was in a very short time. So enter any questions that you have in the chat box. We're happy to answer them. Sometimes this is the best part of the webinar because people's questions get really specific, and it helps everybody to cover that ground that we haven't already covered in this webinar. So we'll take a few minutes now to let people type in their questions. So here's a question that came in. What is the best way to determine which stakeholders to include? Excellent question. I would say these are the factors that go into that question. Are we a new program or not? How many people could be in my stakeholder list? Is that a big group or a small group? So those are the first two things I would say you have to think about. So let's say this is a new program. I would try to get representation among all the stakeholder groups. So program staff, people who work frontline with youth every day, program management. I would make sure that I have at least one parent, at least one youth, but maybe not a big group because you're just starting out. So that's one way you can do this. Another way you can do it if you're a new program is to just have the program staff who are paid by the program. So that means just the frontline staff and just the administrators. Either way is great to start out because you get a relatively small group of people and you can start from there and build. If you have been doing this for a while and you've done the QSA process previously, or your program's been around for a while, then I would say, who are the people that you care about the most or have the most influence over your process? So again, that would definitely include program staff and program management You can include all of them or a representative sample of those groups. But now you might include young people because the program is for them. Now you might include families because this program is also for them, right? It provides a service to them knowing that their kids are being taken care of when school is out. You might include key partners like a school district or a community-based organization that provides a lot of key services. There might be local businesses or a chamber of commerce or other groups in your community that really care about the program. Funders might be involved, board members, advisory council members. So the best way to determine which stakeholders to include is what's reasonable to do the whole process with. If you don't have space for a big group, you're probably only going to have a small group. If you can't schedule all of those different people, who can make a commitment? So you might have all of the program staff and all of the managers, but maybe only one other stakeholder from each of those other groups, because that's who can commit to all of the different meetings. So those are the questions I would ask to go through that process. It really comes down to time, but it also comes down to how many people can you accommodate. In my mind, a group of 5 to 20 is probably about the size of group you want to do with consensus. So for a very small program, that's easy to get into that range. I think it's valuable to have a lot of different stakeholders in the process, but that can quickly grow your numbers depending on how many stakeholders you're talking about. So those are some of the different things that I would say in terms of trying to pick your stakeholders. This is very contextual. You get to make these decisions, but those are the things that I would think about. We have a new question coming in. I oversee 4 sites. Can I use this tool across all 4? So I take that question to mean, do I use the tool and do one assessment for 4 sites? You can. I strongly recommend doing each site individually. So have each site do its own assessment with its own stakeholders site by site. This is why I say that. I think the tool is best when you can combine the actual what is happening with young people in the program space with the bigger picture, what's the mission of our organization, and what are we trying to accomplish with that staff and with those kids. So I think the tool is perfect to do at a site level, the place where young people are being served, and organizing stakeholders around that site. While there's certainly some elements, especially administration and organization, for example, that will touch all 4 of those sites. So that might help you pick which elements to do. You might have the same group of stakeholders look at administration across all 4 sites, but you might do the programming and activities site by site. That's another way you can slice and dice it. We have another person who asks, do I have to complete all elements every year? Again, that is up to you. So if you are required to do this process, you should at least have your quality self-assessment leader, do the entire tool. So at least one person should be looking at all of the elements at least once a year. So beyond that, you have to decide how you're going to do it. For example, the supplemental element that was just added, informal STEM learning. If you're not doing any STEM learning in your program, if that's not a feature of your program, it's probably not an element that you want to cover. But administration and organization, I would say, is something you probably want to cover because you want to make sure that all the pieces are in place behind the scenes to support the work on the ground. The value in having your quality self-assessment leader do the entire tool is that then you can make a better decision about what elements do we focus on. So another way that you can do this process is to have your different stakeholder groups do different elements so you can break it out. So maybe your program staff and youth talk about programming and activities. They talk about the environment and the climate, but your business partners, your stakeholders at the school district or your community organizations that partner with you, maybe they're looking at school day linkage and they're looking at administration and organization because those elements touch them more directly. So you can still do all the elements and still get a lot of stakeholders involved, but sort of break it out. You just have to be careful about how you manage that. So it's not feasible for some programs to do all 10 elements because of the amount of time it takes. I understand that. That's why I don't say, yes, you should. I think there's definitely value in understanding where your program fits. I would say at least one person needs to do all the elements because you want to make sure that you're not, caught by surprise when you're scoring really low in one element just because it happened to be later in the book and you were starting with 1, 2, and 3. I hope that answered the question. Next question. Do you provide any resources we can use to help us make improvements beyond the QSA tools and templates? Yes. So our website has elements listed. So people can go to our website. They can look at each of the elements. So for example, environment and climate. And on that page, they can see all of the different indicators. At the bottom of that page are resources around that element. So if you find that you're stuck on some indicators under environment and climate, you're like, well, we don't know what to do to improve our physical environment. Our webpage has guidance, resources, tips and tricks all at the bottom of that webpage. So that's a great resource to go to if you find that you're scoring low in an area and you're not really sure what to do about it. Another thing that we can offer is training. So if you're finding that there are key areas where you're really struggling, we provide professional development for the field to address those needs. So we regularly appear at conferences around the state, offering workshops on different topics, but we can also come to your program, to your district, to your region to deliver workshops that address all of these areas. So those are some additional resources we have. Obviously, the website is free. You can access those and see what's available there through that. But you can also reach out to me, Timothy at networkforyouthsuccess.org, and I'll put that up on our slide in just a second. I should do that right now. There we go. You can reach out to me directly. I am the Professional Development Director, so if you think training might be a need or you're looking for something that's more on-site, we can provide that. There are fees involved in doing that. We do ask that you pay for our time and, if depending on where you are, travel, possibly overnight stay. The value in doing that, having us come to you, a lot of programs say, yes, we have needs, but we're special. We have very specific needs in our community. We have a very special circumstance. You got to come here to see what we're dealing with. And that can be incredibly valuable to have somebody come in and say, aha, I see now what you're talking about. I see the challenges you're dealing with. Let's work together to find solutions. So those are absolutely some resources we can provide for you. Again, our website, networkforyouthsuccess.org/QSA, is your starting point. Down the right side of that page, all the elements are listed. You can click on any of them and then see all of the resources that we share to help improve the quality in all of those different areas. So you can get real specific about those things. Another question came in. Does completing the QSA and getting a 3 in everything give our site any kind of credential? Unfortunately, no. So because this is a self-assessment and this is an internal process, what you get is a good feeling, and you get to say, yay, we're in compliance with all these quality standards. That's amazing. That's awesome. But there's nothing from the outside that's conferred. So self-assessment is low stakes, which means you are assessing yourself. Nobody else gets to see your data or gets any clue into your process other than what you decide to share with them. But the downside for that is nobody can give you any sort of credentials. So you don't get to say you're better than anybody else, and nobody else gets to say they're better than you because of what they scored on the tool. However, if that's something that's important to you, we do accredit programs. So we do have a statewide accreditation process. If you think your program is hitting all of the notes and you're of higher quality than anybody else, we do have a process by which you can receive direct coaching to assess your program, improve your program, and then at the end of that process, receive a credential that says this program is above and beyond other programs in the state, and we can prove it. There is a cost to that, but that is also on our website. So networkforyouthsuccess.org. You can visit professional development or program improvement. Allie, do you have a link for accreditation? That would probably be the easiest thing. But we do have a page about accreditation, about what it costs. The benefits in New York are you get a coach who comes to your program on a regular basis and supports you in your process. It's a different standard. The accreditation standards begin with OCFS licensure and then move beyond those and put a higher standard and more detail to each of those standards, but it does play very nicely with the quality self-assessment. So if you're getting high marks the way you self-assess, you might be ready for accreditation. You can try before you buy. You can download the full accreditation tool and look at those standards and see what's different, what's the same, and see if that would be a good stretch for you. I'll tell you, there are fewer than 50 accredited programs in the state of New York. So if you do decide to go through accreditation and you've been through the QSA process and you feel like we're hitting all these notes, we're ready for the next level, that would certainly put you in elite company. So the other thing to think about is the credential is for individual staff. So if you've got some staff people that you want to turn into future leaders and you want to help develop them, the school age care credential is also something that we manage. There are host agencies around the state that lead in-person classes, and candidates who earn the school age care credential qualify to be site leaders, site directors in OCFS licensed program. So that credential travels around the state. So it's something you can put on your resume and say, I'm qualified to lead a program, and OCFS would say, yes, you are. Doesn't matter what your other training was in, you've proved that you get school age care, you are certainly qualified to be a leader. So that's another credential to share. Allie has both of those in the chat box, networkforyousuccess.org/accreditation if you're interested in the program level certification, and networkforyousuccess.org/credential for the individual school age care credential. I see that there are no other questions, and the clock on the wall says we only have 3 minutes left anyway. So let me end by saying thank you. I really appreciate your time today. You can contact us, Timothy at networkforyousuccess.org, or call me directly, 518-486-8559. I'm the Professional Development Director. If you have any other questions about our organization, Allie is our Associate Executive Director. She's Allie at networkforyousuccess.org. Again, our website is a great resource for a lot of different information. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. We'll share those in the chat box too. We really appreciate your time today and hope that you'll stay connected with us. I'll stay on for another couple of minutes if anybody has any other questions they want to ask in the chat. But we will stop recording. Thank you so much again for your time. I hope this was helpful. Good luck in improving quality.